I've been roasting on my Behmor for over 8 years, still have the roaster, and I'm actually using it in this video. I'm going to do a whole roast from beginning to end. I'm going to show you how I get a great profile with some really nice, sweet tasting coffee here at home. So stick around. Thank you for joining me today and welcome to the Virtual Coffee Lab. I get many requests from people asking me to roast coffee with the type of roaster that they have so that they can see how I'm doing it. That's really difficult because roasters, there's a lot of them and they're expensive. Most of them are expensive. So today's video is for everybody. I'm going to be using a Behmor 1600 Plus. I've had this Behmor for many years. It's been a great roaster for me. But the principles I'm showing you can be applied to any roaster. And the end result is a great cup of coffee. So this is going to be a complete video from beginning to end with the Behmor. So the Behmor people are going to love this, but don't get lost in the toaster oven on the screen for those who aren't Behmor lovers. So whether you're roasting on a hot air system or whether it is a toaster oven or a Behmor or a other type of drum roaster, whether it's something that's more automated like the Bullet or something that's completely manual like the Caldi, these principles can still apply to you. The first thing that we want to talk about is the charge temperature. I've got a couple of different videos dealing with charge temperatures, my dry phase, why the dry phase is so important, and also I have a video on charge temperatures. That's something you should look at. But charge temperature is the first thing that all of us need to be thinking about. Well, just about all of us. Some of the air roaster people can warm up their roasters and then go ahead and start the, throw the beans in their air system and begin their roast. But truthfully, most of the air systems roast really quick anyway, and that isn't that much of an issue. But for those that have other types of roasters or other types of environments like the Behmor or like a toaster oven or even a drum roaster, we want to have a pre-warmed environment and a stable environment, somewhat stable environment. So that means preheating your device. So I did 2 different roasts and I used 2 different charge temperatures for my roast, and it did have an influence on how quick the roast went. So that's something you're going to want to think about when it comes to roasting coffee is what temperature do you want to start at, or do you want to pre-warm your roaster? Those are things to be thinking about. Now the other thing that all of us can do and we should do, and I'm doing in this video, is to log our roast. And so every 30 seconds I'm going to be writing down the time and the temperature of the roast. So for me, it was this brown piece of paper, and I know you're not going to be able to see it really good on the screen, but I wrote down every temperature and time every 30 seconds, and that gave me a visual of what was happening with my heat, so I knew how to change the heat. I also marked events. These are things that are all very important. I highly recommend that you guys take a look at my roasting basics or roasting essentials playlist. That is going to help give you some clarity on what I'm talking about. But you're going to see me flesh this out here on this roast. You're going to see my hand writing down the time and the temperature and writing down the event. And so I'll try to keep you informed of what's happening along this roast, and then you'll kind of see the end result of how this works. One last caveat, and that is that I'm using I think I'm roasting I'm roasting an El Salvador natural coffee. It's going to roast different than a Brazilian, or it'll roast different than a Ethiopian coffee or a washed coffee. So there are going to be variables in the way that I'm roasting. So you can roast the exact same way that I'm roasting here, but your results might be a little different. That's important because, one, because of expectations. I don't want you to try to do exactly what I'm doing and say, oh, this coffee didn't taste good, so I'm not going to do that anymore. This is a concept for you to take and apply to your environment, to your roaster, to your beans, and you'll be able to take this and then build on it. What is the end result? For the Behmor people, you'll be able to have a recipe. For drum roasting people, you should be able to have, on all roasters, you should be able to have a recipe. What is that? That is basically, if you're logging it and writing it down, you should be able to replicate that fairly closely. It won't be exact, but it'll be pretty close the next time you want to roast coffee. So, matter of fact, on the back of my roaster here, I've got a recipe for my Guatemalan Huehue that I roast. And it's got charge temperature, how long I soak it, the fuel settings, the times, all of the events, changing the drum speed, changing the gas level, all of that is on this recipe here for me to roast over and over and over and over and get pretty much the same result every time. So when we're done with this roast here on this Behmor, this for me is going to be a great Behmor recipe for my El Salvador natural coffee that I have. And I'll be able to take that same recipe and I'll be able to apply that to a similar type coffee, similar density, similar process, similar bean size. And I'm going to have to make some tweaks, some minor changes with my times and temperatures, but the results should be somewhat the same. They should be pretty close. And then once you get a feel for this, then you'll be able to make your changes based on your coffee. So I'm doing a Central American natural, but if I were to do an Ethiopian washed, I might want to have a different charge temperature, a higher charge temperature. I may want to have a shorter soak or a longer soak. You know what I'm saying? So you'll be able to tweak those things with different coffees once you get a comfort level of being able to do this. All right, so let's get to the roast. I'm going to go ahead and start playing the video. So I'm going to be down in the corner and narrating what's going on and talking about the concepts and what was happening with this roast. And you're going to be able to see me work through this on the Behmor. Again, for those who don't have a Behmor, don't get lost in what you see on the screen as much as what's happening with the heat and the decisions that I'm making and why I'm making them. All right, let me just interrupt 1 second and ask you guys a question. What roaster are you using to roast coffee with? I asked that question in a poll that's on my channel on the community tab, and if you could answer that, I would really appreciate it. Some of you have done that already. I've gotten quite a few responses, but a lot of you haven't, and that would be great if you would. That helps me craft content to the type of roaster you're using, or at least concepts to help you with your roasting journey, or to address some of the things that might be things that you would encounter with your roaster. Also, if you like this video, hit the like button and subscribe if you aren't subscribed. Let's get back to roasting with the Behmor. All right, as I had mentioned, I pre-warmed my roaster to 210 degrees. I did that over a couple of different roasts. I had used it, let it cool down a little bit. So I pre-warmed it to 210 degrees, and then I turned the roaster off, loaded my preloaded drum cassette into the roaster, slid the chaff tray in, and I began the roast. On the Behmor, I'm roasting 8 ounces of coffee. That's a half a pound. The Behmor is capable of 1 pound. So here's a concept for everybody. If you have a roaster that's capable of roasting 1 pound, you can go ahead and do that, but just know that it's going to take more energy and more time to roast that coffee than if you use a lighter load. So on the Behmor, you'll be able to achieve this roast or a similar roast like this in a similar amount of time with the 8 ounces of coffee. There's advantages and disadvantages to that. It's up to you on how you want to do that. And then I hit the P1 button and then start. That starts the roast on a Behmor, and then immediately after that, I hit P5. I hit P5 to put my roaster into the manual mode. So the Behmor is unique because it'll overheat and just shut down. I was actually doing a test not long ago with different charge temperatures, and the Behmor, once you hit 200 or 320 degrees, the Behmor will shut down. At least mine shuts down. It's older, and I think that's kind of like the safety feature that's built into the Behmor. The newer ones, it might be a little different. Plus, there's a fan that kicks on, so there are some differences in Behmor models, but the concepts are still the same. So I was concerned about the Behmor shutting down and overheating, and so that's another reason why when we see these temperatures that I'm going to be roasting, I stay on the lower side of the safety shutoff for the Behmor. So I load this coffee in. By the time I do that and hit P5 and go into the manual mode, I am at 190 degrees. I mark that down, 0 and then 190. So here on my notes, you can see when I started it that I started it out at 0, 190 degrees, 30 seconds. I wrote down 192 degrees, 1 minute, 207 degrees, 1 minute and 30 seconds, 223 degrees. So we can see the heat is climbing, and it looks like from 1 minute to 2 minutes, I've got a rate of rise of about 30 degrees per minute. How do I know that? I took 237 degrees at 2 minutes, and I subtracted that from 207 degrees at 1 minute, and the difference is 30. So my roaster environment increased 30 degrees in 1 minute. If some of this is a little basic for some of you, I apologize, but there's a lot of times I'll say things in my videos and then people will say, you know, it would help if you would explain a little bit more about why you're doing this or what you're doing. So that's why I'm doing this. All right, so I'm continuing to write down these times. 3 minutes at 268 degrees, 330 at 282. And so as I'm starting to get close to this 300 degree mark, I have two things on my mind. And so for those that are roasting on a regular roaster, dry will usually take place between 300 and 340 degrees, depending upon your roaster, the probes, how your roaster is reading temperatures, and how fast you're going in this charge temperature that you've used. If you've got a super high charge temperature, you're going to fly through that time or that temperature range I just shared with you, and your beans aren't even going to be fully dry. All right, so at 4 minutes, I'm at 295 degrees. If I wait 30 more seconds before I make a temperature change, I could be too close to that 320 degree mark and the system could shut off. So I back off the heat at 4 minutes and 15 seconds. I back the heat down to P4. So on a Behmor, P5 is 100% power when you're in the manual mode. P4 is 75%, P3 is 50%, P2 is 25%, and P1 is no energy, or I'm not even sure. I think it's no energy. So P4 at 4:15, at 4:30 I take a temperature reading and I'm at 307 degrees. So I hold P4, I leave that alone, wait till 4:45, and I increase my drum speed. I did that for two reasons. One, to create air movement, and that air movement, secondly, is to basically help the roast start to utilize the convection style roasting. So we have conduction heat where the beans are touching the cage or your drum wall or your roaster pan or whatever it is you're roasting on. And convection is when hot air is introduced into the system, air moving around the beans, and that's contributing to the roasting process. So by me hitting P4, slowing down my temperature, and then hitting the D button for the drum to increase my drum, I am basically helping the roasting process move along and not stall. At 4:30, I'm at 5 minutes, I'm at 313 degrees. So I have been increasing in my temperatures, but now at 5:30, I noticed that my temperature started to drop. So I hit P5 to start to ramp my temperature back up. I'm closely watching the beans now for color change. I'm watching the way that they tumble. I'm watching the way that they look in their color. And on a Behmor, it's difficult because that light is kind of a yellow tinge, but we want our beans to go from green to yellow, and at that time I want to mark that event. On the Behmor, P5 at 6 minutes, I'm at 289, and at 6:30, I'm at 293. So my temperature is starting to go back up, and I call dry end at 6 minutes and 30 seconds. That's when my beans finally finish turning from green to yellow. From this point on, I want to try to have my roast be about 35% of my total roast time in this middle phase. So we have this dry phase that we just completed. My target for that dry phase was to be half of the roast time would be spent through this dry phase. The second half of the roast is going to be this browning phase and the development phase after first crack starts. And when I drop the beans, so that those two phases should be the other 50%. So at 7 minutes, I'm at 297 degrees. At 7:30, 300, it's starting to creep up. At 8 minutes, 304. Same all the way down, 8:30, 304 degrees. Now, I guess we should stop for a second. And one thing I haven't really been talking about too much, because it's really, really difficult to deal with on a roaster like this, and that is a descending rate of rise. I think the best thing that we can do, and the purpose of this video is dealing with heat management, but the number one goal of this video is to be able to get our roast phases within the time frames that we want, so that we've got a really good chance of having some good tasting coffee. When it comes to a rate of rise, and that's the rate of the temperature increase or decrease in the roasting environment, we want to have a slowly descending rate of rise as once we finish the dry phase and we are going through the rest of the roast. That's really difficult, and I didn't accomplish that on this roast, but I don't want that to be the focus. I mean, that's a goal. That's something that when you get more comfort, you can do. But primarily, I'm trying to get my roast to have the first half of my roast be the dry phase, and then the second half of my roast be this browning phase and the development phase. I've got an entire video devoted towards this this browning phase. It's called How to Roast Sweet and Flavorful Coffee. That's in the Essentials playlist that I've got up here in the corner. Check that out. And I also have a video on development as well, and it talks about the purpose, what our goals are, and what the impact is for longer or shorter development times. I'll tell you this, I did 2 different roasts on the Behmor here with this coffee. Charge temperatures were different, and so that caused me to have a different length of time during this middle phase. The difference was something I could taste. On the longer browning phase roast, the coffee was a little more bitter. On the shorter time, the coffee was a little bit sweeter. Now, I haven't told you what the time was or the percentage was yet, but if we're using this 50, 30, 20 concept that I've been talking about in a lot of my videos as a starting point, 50% dry time, 30% browning, 20% development. So 30% of my total roast time I want to have in the browning phase. So on this roast, I ended up getting 32% of my time was in the browning phase. On the other roast that I did on this, it was 41%. And the 41% coffee had a little bit of a bitterness. There was still a little sweet, but there was a little bit of bitterness in it, so I think I stretched out the browning phase a little too long. Again, it talks about that in the video that I mentioned, so check that out. First crack was at 10 minutes and 30 seconds, and then I changed the heat to P3. 11 minutes was 302. So 10:30 was somewhere between 302 and 307, so I'll just say 305 degrees. So now I'm in the development phase, and I'm letting this roast. I'm letting it slow down some more to try to stretch out the development time a little bit. And at 11:30, I'm at 295 degrees. At 12 minutes, I'm at 291 degrees. First crack has been going on. And on the Behmor, if you don't get this coffee out of the roast, out of the Behmor roaster, or if you don't open up the door completely and hit the cool button, then the roast is going to continue on. And truthfully, it probably goes on at least another 15 seconds or a little bit longer with the temperatures of the environment. So my total roast time was 12 minutes and 15 seconds when I opened up the roaster and hit the cool button. Realistically, it probably went till 12:30, but I'm just marked 12:15 for cool. So here's the part that is really interesting. And I've already tasted this coffee, and I can tell you that I was really happy with the result of the coffee. The color was really good. The flavors were really good. And this is a coffee that I've had problems roasting on this drum roaster. I keep getting a little bit of an ashiness. I keep trying to keep this total bean temperature on the low side because there always seems to be kind of an ashy flavor, and I was concerned about that. On the longer roast that I did, the higher charge temperature roast with the 41% that was a little more bitter, this tasted a little ashy as well. But on this roast that I did, there was very little of that, very little of the roastiness. I got a nice raisin. There was a little bit of creaminess to the coffee, some underlying sweetness and some caramel. I really enjoyed this coffee. It was good. A little bit of nuttiness as well, like an almond kind of a flavor. And it was just a really enjoyable coffee. The Behmor did a great job. And so my total roast time, and here I'm going to break this down so that you can see this. I'm going to get this to show on the screen here. My total roast time was 12 minutes and 15 seconds. If you take 12:15 and you convert that to seconds, so 12 minutes times 60 gives you 720 degrees plus 15 seconds, which is the 15 on the 12 minutes and 15 seconds. A total roast time of 735 seconds. So I took the total number of seconds for the dry phase, and I divided that by the total roast time, and then I multiplied that by 100. And that gave me my percentage of 53%. So my dry time was 53%. My goal was to be 50% or less. It was 53. So not too far off. Okay, the browning phase, I had a total of 240 seconds. I took 240, divided that by 735, multiplied that by 100, and I got 32%. So my browning phase was 32%. The development is a total of 105 seconds, and that was 14% of the total roast time. So it was 105 divided by 735 times 100 gives me 14%. Some of you are hearing, oh, 14%, that's not good. You want 20% development. 20% is what people talk about, but 20% is not a requirement. Depends on the coffee that you're roasting. I'm roasting a natural. I roast all of my naturals on the shorter side of the 20% development. The other factor here is that honestly, 14%, the coffee was probably still roasting a little longer than that. Because Behmor takes a while to cool down, and I did that intentionally. I shut and went into the cool mode intentionally early to try to make sure that I didn't over roast this coffee. And for those that roast on a Behmor, most of you are familiar with this. Behmor takes a long time to cool the beans down, and so you can see what I did here. I opened up the Behmor and hit the cool button and just let the cool air come in. And I was going to take the drum out, but that I didn't have the right gloves, and that was I'm just going to burn myself if I try to do that. So again, the taste really told the story here, and it was a great coffee. I really enjoyed it. If I really wanted to try to tweak this profile, I could have shortened my dry time from 53% to a little under 50%. That would have sped up my roast time, my total roast time. So how would I have done that? I could have increased the charge temperature on the roaster to 220 or to 225 degrees, and that definitely would have given me a little hotter environment, and that probably would have made up the difference right there. The concepts that I'm sharing with you are beginning concepts. Percentages are beginning percentages. It's not the only way to roast, and you can use those as a starting point to make adjustments. I hope this makes sense. I'd love to hear your comments. For those of you who are Behmor roasters, I'd like to hear what you think about the roast that I did, or how you do your roast differently, or if you've had challenges with your Behmor and you've got roasts that just don't taste right. Go ahead and share those in the comments, and we'll see what we can do to get some of that figured out. Or if you've tried my profiles and you want to share your comments on that, go ahead. If you've tried what I'm sharing and it's not working for you, share those comments as well. I'm not concerned about whether this is going to work for you or not. I'm pretty confident that you're going to have some good success and you're going to learn from this. And again, it's going to be a starting point. For all the other people using different roasters, the takeaway on all this is this trial and error and writing down all of your times and temperatures and events and trying to work this through. Watch the videos that I have on the essentials for roasting. That'll be really helpful. That'll put some context into what I shared today. And again, ask questions if you have questions about your experience roasting coffee or trying what I've been sharing, and if that's been working for you or not. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining me today, and I hope you guys have a great week roasting. See you next time.